Hey there, it's that time again. Time to sit back and enjoy a brand new story. Today we travel to the serene tranquility of Botswana, where Emily had a terrifying run-in with one of the most feared snakes on the planet, the Black Mamba. As always, this story is based on real events and displays the reality so many people living in these parts face on a regular basis. Just a quick reminder that all profits generated from the monetization of this channel goes to helping abandoned and destitute pups. So if you want to contribute to this desperate fight, simply subscribe to the channel, like the video, and watch it, or let it play while you carry on with other things, all the way to the end. These actions help us use the YouTube algorithm to generate as much income for this cause as possible. And if you're in a chatty mood, drop a comment and let us know which topics you like best when it comes to real-life stories. Now let's get right into this incredible story. The golden hues of the early morning sun stretched across the endless plains of Botswana, painting the landscape in a warm, inviting glow. The sky, a pale blue canvas, was just beginning to brighten as the first rays of light pierced the horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of dew-laden grass and the earthy aroma of the African bush. It was the perfect day for a safari, one that promised to be filled with awe-inspiring encounters with nature's most magnificent creatures. Emily Carter, a marketing manager for a tech company in Seattle, Washington, had always dreamed of visiting Africa. The vast savannas, the rich tapestry of wildlife, and the sense of adventure that seemed to pulse through the very air had called to her for as long as she could remember. Now, standing on the edge of the Chobe National Park, that dream was finally a reality. A seasoned traveler with a love for the natural world, Emily had saved for years to experience the magic of a Botswana safari. Dressed in light khaki clothing that she had bought at a clothing shop in Gaborone, the capital of Botswana, with a wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the sun, Emily looked every bit the adventurer she had always imagined herself to be. Her heart raced with excitement as she climbed into the open-top Land Rover, her camera slung around her neck, ready to capture the sights and sounds of the day. The vehicle's engine purred to life, and soon they were off, bumping along the dirt track that led deeper into the wilderness. Her companions on this journey were a small group of fellow travelers, each as eager as she was to witness the wonders of the African landscape. But it was the guides, seasoned veterans of the bush, who commanded the greatest respect. Thabo and Kagiso, both native Botswanans, had spent their lives in these lands. They knew every animal track, every bird call, and every subtle shift in the wind that signaled the approach of something extraordinary. Thabo, tall and muscular with a calm demeanor, sat at the wheel, his trained eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Kagiso, slightly older with a weathered face and a deep, resonant voice, perched on the passenger seat, sharing his wealth of knowledge with the travelers as far as they went. Together, they had led countless safaris, guiding tourists through the wilds with a steady hand and an unshakable confidence. As the Land Rover ventured further into the park, the group was soon rewarded with the sight of a herd of elephants grazing peacefully by a waterhole. The massive creatures moved with a grace that belied their size, their trunks curling around tufts of grass as they fed. Emily's camera clicked rapidly, trying to capture every moment of this incredible encounter. The sound of birds chirping, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the distant roar of a lion, in whose direction they were slowly making their way, created a symphony of nature that filled her with a deep sense of peace. The journey continued, with each turn in the road revealing new wonders, towering giraffes nibbling on acacia leaves, the pride of lions they were pursuing during the first part of the safari lounging in the shade, and a dazzle of zebras galloping across the plains. Emily was entranced, her senses heightened by the thrill of being so close to these wild, untamed creatures. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting harsh shadows across the landscape, the group had no idea that their perfect day was about to take a life-threatening turn. In the heart of this beautiful, serene land, a silent threat lurked, coiled and ready to strike, waiting for the unwary to cross its path. The group continued their safari into the late hours of the morning. The Land Rover bounced along the dirt road, while the sun started to make its presence known with more and more vigor the further they went. Eventually, the heat started to take its toll. The once refreshing breeze had vanished, leaving the air heavy and still. The only sound the occasional hum of insects and the soft murmur of Emily's fellow travelers. Even the wildlife seemed to be taking a midday pause, retreating to the shade to escape the oppressive heat. It was at this stage that Kagiso suggested they stop for a break and some refreshments. As the vehicle rolled to a standstill beneath a large baobab tree, Thabo turned to the group with a smile. "We can take a short break here. We've been on the move for a few hours now. It's a good time to stretch our legs, have some water, and enjoy the view." The group, grateful for the chance to rest, climbed out of the vehicle. Emily stretched her arms above her head, feeling the tension ease from her shoulders. The baobab tree, with its massive trunk and wide canopy, offered a cool respite from the sun. Its gnarled roots protruded from the ground, creating natural seats where the travelers could rest. "Drink up, everyone. The sun can be unforgiving out here." Kahiso handed out bottles of water from a cooler, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile as he offered them to each person. Emily took a long sip of water, savoring the coolness as it slid down her throat. She gazed out at the landscape before her, an endless expanse of golden grassland dotted with thorny bushes and the occasional cluster of trees. The beauty of the scene was breathtaking, a reminder of why she had traveled so far from home to experience this untamed part of the world. Revealing a deep connection that only someone who has lived his entire life in such a place could possess, Kahiso's tales were filled with reverence for the land and its creatures, and the delicate ecosystem that has supported life in this harsh environment for eons. He spoke of the balance between predator and prey, and the animals they had seen that morning. As the group settled into their surroundings, he began to share stories of the park. Emily listened intently, her mind conjuring vivid images of the scenes he described. But as she relaxed into the moment, something caught her eye, a movement in the grass barely noticeable just beyond the shade of the baobab tree. She squinted, trying to make out what it was. Her curiosity piqued. At first she thought it might be a lizard or perhaps a small bird foraging among the underbrush. But as she focused, she realized with a jolt of fear that it was something far more dangerous. Just a few meters away, a black mamba was slithering silently through the grass at breakneck speed, its sleek, dark body moving with a fluid grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had read about black mambas before, their speed, their deadly venom, their aggressive nature when threatened. The snake's reputation was legendary, and she knew that an encounter with one could be fatal if not handled with extreme caution. Now it must be mentioned at this point that mambas have been reported to charge at people when they feel threatened, and with it being such a hot day, this mamba would have been lightning fast and fully charged up. For a moment, Emily was paralyzed by fear, unable to move or speak. The black mamba, seemingly oblivious to the humans only a few feet from it, continued on its path, weaving its way through the grass with a single-minded purpose. Emily watched in horror as it drew closer, its head held high, scanning its surroundings with cold, unblinking eyes. Finally, her voice returned, though it was barely more than a whisper. "Snake," she managed to croak, her hand trembling as she pointed in the direction of the mamba. "There's a snake! A black mamba!" Kahiso's reaction was immediate. His sharp eyes followed Emily's outstretched hand, locking onto the movement in the grass. His expression shifted from one of calm storytelling to intense focus in an instant. "Everyone, stay very still," he commanded, his voice low and steady, yet carrying an urgency that could not be ignored. "Don't make any sudden movements. Don't move at all, no matter what." The group, sensing the gravity of the situation, obeyed without question. Silence fell over them, the only sound the rustle of the grass as the mamba continued its approach. Thabo, who had been leaning against the Land Rover, straightened up, his hand instinctively reaching for the long stick he carried for such emergencies. The snake, now aware of the humans, paused, its tongue flicking out to taste the air. The moment stretched on, the tension palpable as everyone held their breath, praying that the mamba would lose interest and move on. But fate had other plans. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she realized that the snake was focused on her and had come to a stop almost right next to her. In her fixation on the creature, she did not realize that she no longer sat squarely on the baobab tree's root. And as she started to topple over, away from the snake, her left leg instinctively shot out to prevent her from crashing to the ground. In that moment, the mamba lunged at her leg, seemingly coming towards it, its body a blur of motion. Emily barely had time to register what was happening. She knew that the mamba lunged at her leg. She even saw its head smack into it just below her knee. But as she did not feel anything more than a soft bump, she thought it had just slapped her leg with its head. Emily barely had time to register what was happening. At this moment, all mayhem broke loose. All the guests, Emily included, jumped to their feet and made a beeline for the vehicle. Kahiso tried to step in to prevent anyone else from getting bitten, but he knew if he came within striking range, the mamba would stand its ground and deliver multiple deadly blows. After a brief standoff, the snake lowered its head and made a lightning-fast escape into the grass, away from the humans. It was at this point that both Kahiso and Thabo turned their attention to Emily with alarming urgency. "Where did he get you?" Thabo asked Emily. She pointed to the spot where she felt the tap, but informed the two gravely concerned men that the snake had only tapped her leg and had not bitten her. Thabo and Kahiso, however, knew better. The black mamba bite delivers a venom that contains powerful, rapid-acting neurotoxins and cardiotoxins, but victims often don't even know they have been bitten. as the bite does not produce any significant swelling or pain. In fact, compounds present in the Black Mamba's venom called mambalgins have been found to have the same pain-banishing effect as morphine. "Emily, I need you to roll up your pants to where you felt the snake make contact with your leg," Kahiso asked Emily in a calm but urgent manner. And there, to the shock of everyone, 2 tiny red dots with blood coming from it ever so slightly was clearly visible. The snake's fangs had found their mark, delivering a dose of venom that could cause Emily to die in less than half an hour. A scream tore from Emily's throat as she stumbled backward, the world around her spinning in a dizzying blur. The others sprang into action, but it was Kahiso who reached her first, his hands steady as he helped her to the ground. Thabo, his face grim, stood in place for a second in total disbelief. With the realization that she had in fact been bitten, Emily could suddenly feel the venom coursing through her veins, a cold, creeping sensation that filled her with dread. "We need to act fast. Thabo, get the first aid kit. We need to slow the venom spread until we can get her to the hospital." Thabo nodded and rushed to the Land Rover, retrieving the kit from under the seat. Kahiso gently lifted Emily's leg, examining the bite mark, 2 small puncture wounds beginning to discolor. He worked with practiced efficiency, wrapping a crepe bandage tightly around her leg, both above and over the bite to slow the venom's progression. "Emily, I need you to stay calm. We're going to get you to help, but you need to focus on your breathing. Don't move too much, okay?" He knew that limiting movement in her body until she could get antivenom would be crucial to her survival. Emily nodded, though her mind was clouded with fear. She tried to concentrate on her breathing in and out as Kahiso instructed, but the fear had a firm grip on her, and her heart was racing violently. A strange taste filled her mouth, and she started to feel very clammy as perspiration started to seep out of every pore in her body. All the while, the other travelers stood by, their faces pale with shock, unsure of how to help. "We have to get her to the hospital. There's no time to lose. Help me get her into the vehicle. We need to move now." With great care, they lifted Emily into the back of the Land Rover, arranging her so that her leg was secured, and that she could lay as still as possible while they drove. The other travelers climbed back into the remaining open seats, their excitement from the morning now replaced with a grim determination. They all knew what was at stake. The race against time had begun. As the Land Rover roared to life and sped off along the dirt road, Emily lay in the back, her eyes fluttering as she fought to stay conscious. There was no pain, but it was the fear that gripped her heart, the fear that she might not survive, that this incredible journey might be her last. The landscape blurred past her, the once beautiful scenery now a mere backdrop to the battle raging within her body. Emily could feel the venom spreading, its icy tendrils creeping further into her system. Her clothes starting to get drenched with perspiration. Kahiso sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her arm, offering what comfort he could. "Hang in there, Emily," he said softly. "We're going to get you through this. Just stay with us." But even as he spoke those words, a shadow of doubt crossed his mind. He had seen the damage a Black Mamba bite could do, even with the best medical care. The odds were not in Emily's favor. Only 2 drops of venom from this snake, which is around 15 to 20 milligrams, could kill her in as little as 20 minutes, and mambas of that size would deliver well over 250 milligrams with a single bite. But he refused to let that thought take root. For now, all that mattered was getting her to the hospital. Everything else would have to wait. The Land Rover sped on, carrying its passengers on a desperate journey across the savannah. Emily's world narrowed to the sound of the engine, the rough jostling of the vehicle, and the steady beat of her heart, which she feared might stop at any moment. And so they drove, racing against time and fate, with the life of one woman hanging in the balance. Kahiso and Thabo worked in unison, their focus unwavering as they navigated the emergency. Thabo, his hands steady on the wheel, pushed the Land Rover to its limits, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Every bump and jolt threatened to throw the vehicle off course, but Thabo's skill and experience kept them on track. His mind raced as fast as the vehicle, calculating the time they had left, the distance to the nearest hospital, and the condition of the woman fighting for her life in the back seat. Kahiso knelt beside Emily, his voice a constant, soothing presence. "You're doing great, Emily. We're getting closer. Just hold on a little longer," whispering. I can't." Emily tried to respond, but her throat felt dry and her words came out as a barely audible whisper. She felt disconnected from her body, as if she were floating outside herself, watching the scene unfold from a distance. The world around her blurred, and she struggled to focus, to stay conscious. She knew that if she closed her eyes, she might not open them again. "Emily, I need you to keep your eyes open. Focus on your breathing, in and out. That's it, stay with us." Kahiso noticed her drifting, and his concern deepened. He reached for her hand, squeezing it lightly, trying to keep her grounded in reality. The Land Rover lurched over a particularly rough patch of road, and a sharp pain shot through Emily's leg, causing her to cry out. Kahiso's grip tightened, his heart pounding with urgency. They had to get her to the hospital soon. Time was running out. As they neared the outskirts of the park, the landscape began to change, the dense bush giving way to more open terrain. Thabo pushed the Land Rover even harder, the engine roaring as it surged forward. In the distance, the outline of a small town came into view, a beacon of hope in the vast wilderness. "We're almost there," Thabo called out, his voice strained from the tension. "Just a few more minutes." For Emily, those minutes felt like an eternity. Her vision swam with dark spots, threatening to pull her under. But somewhere deep within her, a small spark of determination flickered. She wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The Land Rover skidded to a halt outside the small rural hospital, and Thabo and Kahiso sprang into action. Time was of the essence, and every second counted. Together, they gently lifted Emily from the vehicle. The cool, sterile air of the hospital was a stark contrast to the dusty heat outside. As Thabo and Kahiso burst through the doors, carrying Emily between them, the medical team was already in motion. The small rural hospital, though modest in size, was equipped to handle emergencies, and the doctors and nurses moved with the precision of a well-rehearsed team. Emily's vision blurred as she was placed on a stretcher, her body now almost completely paralyzed from the venom coursing through her veins. The world around her was a cacophony of voices and beeping machines, but she could hardly make sense of it. All she knew was that her conscious mind was leaving her more rapidly now than at any point on the way to the hospital. "Black Mamba bite," Kahiso said to the doctor with a grim expression. "She was bitten less than an hour ago. We applied a pressure bandage and kept her leg immobilized, but the venom is spreading fast." Dr. Mosadi nodded, her face set in determination. "Get the antivenom ready," she instructed a nurse, who immediately rushed to comply. Turning back to Kahiso, she asked, "Did she lose consciousness at any point?" "No, but she's fading fast. We drove here as quickly as we could." Dr. Mosadi's eyes softened slightly as she placed a reassuring hand on Kahiso's arm. "You did well. We'll take it from here." She turned her attention to Emily, whose eyelids fluttered weakly. "Emily, can you hear me? We're going to take care of you. Just hold on." Emily could barely process the words, her mind drifting in and out of focus. But the sound of Dr. Mosadi's voice anchored her, pulling her back from the brink of unconsciousness. She tried to nod, to show that she understood, but her body wouldn't respond. The nurse returned with the antivenom, and Dr. Mosadi wasted no time. With practiced efficiency, she administered the injection, the antidote to the deadly venom that threatened to take Emily's life. This will start the process to counteract the venom, but we need to monitor her closely. Let's get her on fluids and prepare for any complications. While Dr. Mosadi directed her team, she also administered a shot of subcutaneous adrenaline to Emily to stave off possible anaphylaxis. Within a couple of minutes of the staff administering the second vial of antivenom, Emily fell into cardiac arrest. The venom had done enough damage to outpace the effects the antivenom had. It took them a total of 7 minutes to revive her and have her heart take over its job on its own again. Emily was in a dire state. We do not want to intubate unnecessarily, but we should be ready for it. As is often the case, follow-up shots from additional vials were required to pull her back from the brink of the abyss. As the antivenom began to work its way through her system, Emily eventually recalled feeling a new sensation. Cool, like a wave of relief washing over the tingling in her veins. Her confusion started to dissipate, and after around 2.5 hours since the first vial was administered, Emily became conscious of the fact that her vision started to become clearer, though the exhaustion that followed was nearly as overwhelming. Her body, weakened and paralyzed by the venom, now faced the monumental task of recovery. Mosadi watched the monitors intently, her face revealing nothing of the tension she felt. Although she knew that the antivenom had now started to do its job, she was also well aware that there was still around a 15% possibility that this would not be enough. Every case of snakebite was different. Time would tell if Emily's body could withstand the ordeal. As the hours passed, the hospital room settled into a tense calm. The immediate danger seemed to have passed, but the doctors and nurses remained vigilant, ready to respond at the first sign of trouble. Kahiso and Thabo stood just outside the room, their faces etched with worry. They had done everything they could, but now, Emily's fate was in the hands of the medical team and her own will to survive. The night settled over the small hospital like a heavy blanket, enveloping the building in darkness and silence. Inside the room where Emily lay, the steady beeping of monitors was the only sound, a rhythmic reminder of the battle being fought within her body. The dim light cast long shadows on the walls, adding to the eerie stillness that hung in the air. Emily's body lay still, her face pale against the white of the hospital sheets. The antivenom had evidently countered the spread of the venom, but her body was still fighting to recover from the trauma. Every breath she took was a struggle, as if her lungs were reluctant to draw in air. Her eyelids fluttered occasionally, but she remained unconscious, caught in the delicate balance between life and death. Dr. Mossadi sat at her bedside, her eyes fixed on the monitors that tracked Emily's vital signs. She had seen many cases like this before. Some had happy endings, others did not. But there was always a point, a moment in time when the scales could tip in either direction. She knew that this night would be critical, and she was determined to do everything in her power to ensure that Emily pulled through. Kahiso and Thabo, still shaken by the events of the day, refused to leave the hospital. They sat in the hallway just outside the room, their faces drawn with exhaustion and worry. They had been through so much together, facing the dangers of the wild with a shared sense of responsibility. But this was different. This was a battle they couldn't fight with skill or strength. It was a battle of endurance, and they could only watch and wait. Kahiso glanced at Thabo, who was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. "She's strong," Kahiso said quietly, breaking the silence. "She's been through a lot today, but she's still fighting." Thabo nodded, though his expression remained grim. "I know," he replied, his voice hoarse, "but it's hard not to think about what could happen. We did everything we could, but—" The two men fell silent again, their thoughts heavy with uncertainty. Inside the room, Dr. Mossadi continued her vigil, her mind sharp and focused despite the late hour. She knew the risks, knew the odds, but she also knew that there was hope. The hours dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Outside, the night deepened, and the stars glimmered faintly in the sky. In the hospital, time seemed to stand still, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for the dawn. Finally, as the first light of morning began to filter through the window, a change came over Emily. Her breathing, once labored and shallow, began to steady. The tension in her body eased, and her pulse, monitored so closely by Dr. Mossadi, began to strengthen. Dr. Mossadi leaned forward, her heart lifting with cautious optimism. The long night had been endured, and the first signs of recovery were beginning to show. The recovery process was a journey that fell far outside of the idyllic safari adventure Emily had signed up for. Although the excellent treatment she had received both from Thabo and Kahiso, as well as the medical staff at the hospital, had undoubtedly saved her life, the path to full recovery was still a very delicate and gradual journey, reflecting her body's efforts to heal from the trauma inflicted by one of the deadliest snake venoms. Even after the antivenom successfully neutralized the venom, the damage done to the tissues and nerves remained. The bite site on Emily's leg continued to throb with pain, which, in the weeks that followed, radiated up the affected limb. Swelling around the bite area also persisted, as her body gradually repaired the tissue damage caused by the venom. Emily's muscles also remained extremely sore for days after the incident, caused by the extreme stress during the envenomation. The battle against the venom also left her body in a state of profound exhaustion. Emily's body expended tremendous energy to counteract the venom's effects, and an overwhelming sense of weakness, making even simple tasks feel like monumental efforts, remained a constant companion for her for days on end. Black Mamba venom is neurotoxic, targeting the nervous system and causing muscle paralysis. After the antivenom was administered, the paralyzed muscles in Emily's body didn't instantly regain their full function. The road to recovery involved gradual improvement in muscle control, which ended up taking several weeks of physical therapy to help rebuild her muscle strength and coordination. The Mamba's venom also affected Emily's respiratory muscles, and she experienced breathing difficulties long after the venom was neutralized. Emily constantly experienced shortness of breath for weeks, while her lungs and muscles responsible for breathing fought to regain full functionality. Eventually, Emily did make a full recovery, but the psychological toll of surviving a Black Mamba bite was nothing to scoff at. The experience of being so close to death led to lasting emotional scars. Anxiety and fear, particularly around snakes and environments similar to where the envenomation occurred, had a very real impact on her quality of life. Seeking professional help, Emily was also diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which manifested as flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety attacks. Counseling and psychological support became an integral part of her recovery process, helping her come to terms with the experience and regaining a sense of normalcy. Recovery from a Black Mamba bite is a slow and multifaceted process, requiring both physical and emotional rehabilitation. While the antivenom neutralizes the venom, the journey back to health involves overcoming the residual effects of the envenomation, addressing any side effects from the treatment, and healing from the psychological impact of the ordeal. With time, rest, and the right care, most patients gradually regain their strength and return to their daily lives, though the memory of the experience may stay with them forever. That brings us to the end of this edition. Thank you again for joining us. We truly hope you enjoyed the experience. Also, check out this story about a safari guide who was gored to the brink of death by a Cape buffalo while on a safari walk with guests. Have a great one and see you soon.